Yes, thank you, Rahaf. Rahaf is from Mazrati, an online and guide in Egypt.
As we have three of the biggest companies in Egypt, Tiba, Cairo 3A, and Al-Wadi, why there is no integrations with these companies to have some solutions to the customers and the breeders in Egypt? Integration with the companies. ليه مش دايما بنتكلم على corporations؟ ليه مش بنعمل corporations with the companies to have the best results and have the best solutions of the problems that we have in Egypt? If there is an answer, please.
I think the only cooperation that I can see that benefit, it's a very good question, but the only solution would be in the broiler farms where there is a huge investment. Having said that, and we have the Central Bank of Egypt currently have released that most of the commercial banks has to have 20% of their revenues before end of 2022 to be directed to the small, medium enterprise, SMEs. I think this fund, we can create a fund together, we can manage the fund together and develop the broilers, the farms. Instead of we are investing in this, we get the young generations to invest in these farms. We get the land and we manage the farms on their behalf. We give them the working capital, the initial working capital and the working capital, and we take the chicken from them at the end of the cycle. I think this can help the industry itself. Thank you.
Yes, I hope he answered the first question at least. Did he?
Yes. Okay. If the field of poultry is still attractive to invest in Egypt or in the Middle East, is it still attractive to invest for the customers or the breeders?
Investing in poultry is always attractive, subject to this mechanism that I have elaborated now. I think this makes profitable for the breeder, profitable for us as well, less investments, and the fund is there because you can always generate fund from the banks to create these funds, and they will accept the scenario if we all collaborate together and we created this fund and manage this fund.
Can I add something? I think because of the increasing of population, increasing of poultry or meat demand, we should increase our investment in poultry because it is the cheapest and safest protein. I'm the eldest of you, the eldest one of you. So I think it is necessary. Okay, not only the Egyptian market, but all over the world. It is the cheapest and safest protein to the people. So we should all over the world to invest in poultry, especially in the Middle East and our country in Egypt. Where I'd like to add. We are lucky working in poultry because we are working in a very, very risky business. So the crisis or working on crisis is a lifestyle. It is our lifestyle to work in crisis. There is no any quiet day in our business. It is always crisis. Not crisis, but it is risky, very risky. So we adapt to work in that condition, and we should, as you said, and Mr. Hazim and Mr. Tony, we should collaborate, we should unite together, not only in Egypt, not only in the region, but all over the world to can save each other. Because we live in a small village, we work in one farm all over the world. All the challenges here and there is the same. But how to solve it or how to come over that, that is the solution, or that is the way to collaborate. That's my.
No, Nadeem, you are speaking. Yeah.
Yeah, I just had two very quick comments and suggestions. The suggestion is the following. In order to write, I think there is a lot of common messages coming out of the physical meeting and what we've been saying also from abroad. My impression is if you're going to go into the mode of trying to get some specific recommendations, it would be excellent if we get at least two of the participants, the physical participants, to be part of our group. This is one of the group that is going to try and distill some specific recommendations and conclusions. Two, as is typical in the Middle East, we always go then to the bigger geopolitics, and we started talking about the Ethiopian barrage and reservoir and all of this. My impression is that the recommendations, it would be very good if they are specific to what is under the control of this group. Cooperation, integration, this is so good, and we need to put some more details probably to how to do it. On the other issues, the frameworks and all of that, I just took a second to get this, to do some maybe publicity. Probably you cannot see the book here that I have in my hand because of the background. Anyway, it's called التكامل العربي سبيلا لنهضة إنسانية. So it's called Arab economic integration, a way to the future, and it is the publication I was talking about for ESCWA. I will send the link, but it will offer, there are enough people who have talked about the overall geopolitical thing. Let's take this as a framework, but then really there is so much that the private sector can do in advance of what the public sector is going to be able to come together. I think the private sector can lead in this thing of regional integration and cooperation in this particular sector. Thank you.
Thank you. We had it. التكامل العربي. Thank you, Nadeem. Kate, can you now, I think if you don't have any other questions, or if Kate can address a certain word after what she heard about what's going on in this market, and
I'm very interested in the issue of collaboration, and I think in the UK recently we've seen a problem with fuel supply, and the issue was not actually about fuel at all, it was about driver supply. And the issue has been that over a number of years, the lorry drivers, for whatever reason, have they're getting older, we're not getting younger people into the industry. There are all sorts of things that are contributing to this. And it came to a head recently. And if all the logistics companies had collaborated and shared data to see the trends that were going on in the industry, we could have avoided that issue altogether. So I think the issue of collaboration is really interesting, particularly when you look at market issues. And when a market issue goes against you, there are three things you can do. You either go with the market and adapt, or you change the market by lobbying government and collaborating as a total industry to bring about change, or you find a new market. And those really are your three options. So I think the idea of collaboration is a really, really interesting one, and very, very pertinent to crisis communications. If the industry could collaborate to predict what the crises are that we might face, then we can work together to come up with what the solutions are going to be.
Antoine, are you still with us?
well, for the future generation, it's very difficult to give them any suggestion or anything consulted because they are different, but we are the roots true. And based on the roots, they can do so many achievements with the new technology they are going on. And let's now the idea of Mr. Thunayan about creating a site which is a cooperation between all of us for resolving the crisis. Why not? Why not all those new people, those young people who are super now in technology with a new website and so on, internet. So it is correct if we can go on the idea of Mr. Thunayan, creating a site to cooperate forever between all these people of the poultry industry. We start with the big integrator so we can resolve the problem. Maybe we can, I don't know, they could have better than me, they could have better idea on how to cooperate. But one thing is important, just try, just go on. Just the first step in your 1,000-mile journey, I say to the new generation, go ahead for cooperation. The future is for a cooperation. No one can do anything alone. So start if the laws and the law and the limits between our countries are difficult to overcome. Why not start with the online site? Thank you, Mr. Al-Kadi, Mr. Thunayan. Thank you, Mr. Thunayan, again, because the idea was wonderful. Thank you.
Mr. Farah, Joseph Farah is from Valmina.
Yeah, I want to go back to the question of Mrs. Rahab. If the poultry business is still a good investment. In my opinion, before we go into poultry business and make more farms, we have to concentrate on the production of the raw material, because this is the most important thing in the Arab world now. And this is what will make business of the poultry successful. And what I also suggest, if Ghassan, you can make a special seminar in the future on the investment and production of raw material in the Middle East, the MENA region. And this would be a very good study, and maybe to draw attention to some people to see if they can develop in different countries. Every country is different. Some countries they have subsidies, so they are enjoying the subsidies from the government. And some countries they have the land, but they are not producing enough. So if they can produce, it would be good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. And in fact, the raw material collaboration, one of the conclusions that I will add it in the business, and especially that if you see how much Al-Kadi has developed, because I went through their website, and how much they invested on crop production, on agriculture, and on especially organic food, according to me. So there are investments going on in Saudi Arabia, but as you've said, we need collaboration. We have Sudan, we have Egypt, and we have a lot of land. So wait.
It's one word. Wellness.
Wellness, exactly. And so we can put our forces together if we want to. Nadim, you spoke something about the funds and funders and people putting funds in what the ESQA or World Bank or FAO. If you don't have funders, if you don't have people putting funds, how can you have, or how can you invest, or how can you finance companies? I know that Rabobank is a bank, but the financement of the World Bank or other FAO or other organization that you worked with, how they can have the money to help us?
Yeah, thank you, Ghassan. You know, the equivalent. Let me first say that first go to Rabobank. Because basically the equivalent of Rabobank in the world of the World Bank is the example of IFC. What I have, I mean, it's the closest, let's say, to Rabobank because it has more of a private sector focus. And if you recall from that slide that I said, first you see the commercial banks can help you. This is really where to go first before you get to purely public sector and World Bank financing. So let me take as a very specific example the very important point that was made. I think everyone, and if there is some kind of a joint consensus, is the fact that you can be self-sufficient in the production of poultry and eggs, but you still need to deal with the feed. And I purposely chose the IFC, so the International Finance Corporation example of Nepal to show how by supplying, by assisting the feed producer, you developed then the small producers of the raw material that is going to go to the feed, and so to the feed processing. And this is a very important example that if you ensure a contract between the feed the processing of feed and the small farmer getting that raw material to you, then you have a winning development of those small producers that have a stable contract. So that is one very specific example. I'm sure Nandirk will have other ones, but that's one that I selected from the IFC. You can go and look a bit more at the details. I want to give another example, also purely private sector, this one. InBev, the big producer of beer, has a specific financial instrument, a very specific, it's almost independently managed, just to make sure that they can give concessional loans to the small producers who are going to give to sell to the beer producers in each country all the raw material that is needed. They found it that for their own interest, they had to develop that financial instrument that is going to go. It's all self-generating. They're not doing any charity work with this, but they know that for their industry, if they don't take care of the small producer who is going to produce the input to beer production, they are not going anywhere, and certainly they are not going to be able to do the growth. So those two examples are, in my view, very easily applicable to the poultry industry, that we are all agreeing, it seems, that the feed production is a limiting factor. So let's get together, let's develop even independent financing mechanisms or other before we even go to the more concessional ones. Now, on the concessional ones, I gave the example of IFC. The World Bank itself tries to promote this idea of having contracts between producers and small between processors and small scale producers, agriculturals. But my impression is that before that, on the commercial side, purely from a private and commercial standpoint, there is a lot that we can still do in our region. Sorry, it was a long answer, but I think we're getting to very concrete things, and we have good examples, whether in the region or outside, of how the private sector can take care of itself if it puts all the data that are needed together.
Thank you. Thank you, Nadeem. Thank you, Nadeem. Nandak, you want to speak? Yeah. Nandak, you want to speak? Yeah.
I think there was a very good feedback, I think, from Nadeem, absolutely, and I fully agree with his view between the maybe the joint roles of commercial banks versus the banks like IFC, for example. What is, in my view, is important in this view, because if you are moving to more food security, is that there is a strategic plan and actually maybe on a country or a regional base on how you are going to organize the supply for the future. And I think that's what all banks usually like, actually. If there is really a clear direction, what are the bottlenecks, where are the opportunity, how is the role, what is the role of poultry in that whole story? And poultry is, of course, and we heard that several times, is I think it's the preferred protein. We see that in the figures. It's the cheapest one. It's the most efficient. It's the lowest feed conversion. So a lot of benefits for poultry and eggs there, actually. But if you are going to develop more poultry in the region, of course, you have to tackle all the issues as well. And I fully agree with the bottlenecks that we heard. I think that's definitely in the input side of the value chain. It's in the feed side. It's in the crop production side. And I think that is where you have to tackle, and where you come with a plan on, I think, how you're going to develop that. And I think that regional perspective, what was mentioned, working together, and maybe try to develop a little bit more production in the region is a good thing. But I don't think you're gonna be fully self-sufficient here. Actually, that's very difficult, especially if you are operating in an environment where likely production need to grow 30-40%. So it's going to be difficult to reach that with. So you need to organize the supply of inputs, develop there, maybe invest in crushing plants, import some soya more in strategic location. I think there's been some investments there recently because of the move to self-sufficiency in that. So that part of the story, grains and oilseed, feed processing is important. But my view is that you need to develop a plan actually on maybe where you want to be in 2025. And I think several countries have been doing that with a really structured approach. And I mentioned several times Saudi, but I think it's also in some of the other Gulf states, smaller ones like Bahrain, like Oman, where we see at the moment, I would say, I work globally for Rabobank, but I recognize that these countries are among the countries that attract at the moment some of the biggest investment projects at the moment. And I think perhaps that's related also that there is some plan there, I think, behind it, where also there is a cooperation with governments, also in some. I know, all these kind. There are also strategic investment funds as well. Equity run maybe a bit as an equity company and take positions also in companies that are considered as being strategic as well. So that can be locally, but it can also be international if you need, for example, in the grains and oilseed, if you see this as a bottleneck for the future, that there is investments there. So, that is all related to a plan. And I think that's important, and that's usually the base. And I think for a bank, we are working with risk, of course, and risk. We have also, we are risk adverse as a bank. So I think that is important. So you need always a plan, I think, and that's the government, but also the operational side. And if you look to some of these bigger projects that are at the moment enrolled in the country, in these countries that I mentioned, but also I think in North Africa, there are several ones. I think export finance is one of these tools that is used. I think where, there is a sort of guarantee provided from exporting countries for equipment that is being invested in equipment there. So there are certainly also tools that you can use, I think, to meet with that. But then still, you need a strong strategic long-term plan for where the country is going to be and where you as an individual company want to be in the future, in my view.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for your answer. Thank you for your answer. Dr. Hazem, you had a question, I think. A straightforward question, but it's better to be said by him. Just a reminder, Dr. Hazem is the CEO of Cairo 3A Group.
Hello. The question is for both. The question is for Nandrek and Nadim. Would we suggest having a pilot project for this fund, okay, to develop the industry, where we consider 15 to 20% IRR? Would you join forces together that we create this fund from locally and from the World Bank, from the IFC, from the Robobank? This will give a credibility to such funds, whereby we are sure that this fund will create an IRR of 15 to 20% return on investment. Thank you.
Maybe I will answer first. For my part, I'm retired from these institutions, and I do continue advising some of the projects. But definitely, if there is an interest, I will do my part in trying to direct you to who the interlocutors on the more formal side are. There are all sorts of funds that are available for piloting new ideas, trying to develop tools and instruments that, as long as you combine private and public, I think there is a lot of appetite and interest. I can take the example of the country where Nandrek is based, Holland. Right now, the Netherlands do not make any assistance on the official development assistance if it doesn't have a specific private sector component to it. If it's just giving money out, the Netherlands are not interested. And so there are lots of funding to try and pilot things. On the formal side, I cannot speak for any of these agencies, but I personally will be very interested pro bono, without any request for payment or anything, just to give advice as to how to channel those requests for piloting this. But I can tell you, I've seen pilot projects of that nature getting funded. Thank you.
And I can agree absolutely what Nadim is saying. I think that is also our view, and also I'm happy to think with you about this project. It sounds like a good idea. I think to create a sort of fund somewhere to help develop smallholders, and for sure there are similar examples in other parts of the world. So, which indeed has been funded. So I think it is a good idea, and there are several that could also, but I don't know in this case if that is an idea maybe, or something that you want to do. But there will be also potential co-investors also interested in this sort of funds, in my view. So there are quite a few sovereign health funds active, I would say, and these guys usually have also appetite to take positions in this sort of project. So I think there are different ways here to get this sort of funds created, in my view.
Can we arrange this via Ghassan for a further step? Okay.
He suggests to have a Zoom meeting, both Nadine and Derek, with Mr. Hazim, me, Tony, whatever, to can go forward in that.
It's a good idea to have it in our conclusions to combine, let's say, for example, committees or just meeting between you and the presence, if you are okay with that. So I'll add it with my conclusion, and in fact I really thank you. We are, if we don't have any other questions, I think we had a very good discussion. If you don't want to add other points, I will ask Renate and Franz. Renate from the VIV, Franz from what? They will help me to tell you really thank you for your presence.